If you have the option to live from anywhere, I don't think living in the West makes sense anymore. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why. So I'm currently here in Bangkok. I'm staying in a high-rise condo with a panoramic view of the city. I get to eat amazing food. The city is safe. It's exciting. There's tons of things to do. And all of that can be accessed for probably less than $2,000 a month, maybe slightly more than that, depending on your lifestyle. Yet so many people will still sit there and say,
"Oh, New York City is the best city in the world. No city in the world gives what New York City offers."
But what I want to ask yourself is that if you actually break these cities down in terms of what they give into their constituent parts, and you compare it to cities like Bangkok, like Kuala Lumpur, like Singapore, like Dubai, do you actually think that what you're getting for what you're paying is good value? Maybe it is, maybe it is not. But in this video, I want to break down some of the reasons as to why people still seem to think that the West is the only place in the world where you can have a great life, and sort of debunk them, because I think a lot of the views that people have of living in the West nowadays are simply outdated. And what I'm going to argue is that you can get a much better life for much less somewhere else if you do have the option. Now, of course, if you want to be an investment banker, a lawyer, where you have a 9-to-5 job where you're stuck in one location, for those cases, yes, of course, the West will still offer the best because they do have the higher salaries. But the bigger point here also is that in today's age, the best way, the most efficient way to become successful, to build wealth, is not to work one of these jobs in New York City or London, because with the rents and with the taxes that you're paying, your wealth building will simply be so incredibly inefficient. And simply by earning less but living somewhere else in the world where you get so much more for your money, you're not only going to have a better life, a safer life, but you'll also build wealth much faster. What I'm specifically talking to are people who are growth minded, who want to succeed in life, who want to build wealth for themselves and their family. Sure, if you're broke, if you don't care about these kinds of things and you just want to take advantage of the system, the safety nets, everything like that exists in these Western countries, sure, those countries will still offer you the most. But that is really not who I'm talking to in this video. Really what this all comes down to is cost versus value. So we can look at the different places in the world in terms of a matrix. Top right corner, we have high cost and high value. And this is where most people think the Western countries are. Sure, they know they pay a lot, but they think that they also get a lot. And we'll get back to that later. Then we have high cost, low value, low cost, high value, and low cost, low value. Of course, I'm not talking about moving to a country somewhere in Central Africa where sure, you could live for $50 a month, but you will also not getting anything. That is not what I'm talking about. But what average people tend to think is that every country outside of the Western world will fall into this low cost, low value place in this matrix. And what I'm here to tell you is that it's absolutely not true. There are many countries, the countries that I talk about on this channel, that will be low cost and high value, or high cost and high value. That is what I want to focus on. But first, let's go over the few reasons that people usually give as to why they want to live in the West and why they think that paying these huge costs are still worth it to them. First, it's going to be the safety nets. Now, sure, to some extent, this is true. If you become homeless, if you don't have a job, most of these Western countries will offer unemployment benefits, all sorts of safety nets, things like this. So again, yes, if you are the kind of person where you think that you might need these things, then sure, the Western countries will still be the best for you, because a lot of the countries are even incentivizing people to take advantage of all these benefits and all these things. And that's one of the reasons why they are declining so much, but that is a topic for another video. But again, the types of people I'm here talking to, like, you're not going to be using these safety nets anyway. You are hardworking, you are successful, or on the route to becoming successful because you want to become successful. So really what the safety nets simply give you is more taxes where you are paying for the safety nets for other people who are actually using them, but you don't actually benefit from them. Next is healthcare. Again, in some cases, this is a valid point. If you absolutely need emergency care in many of the Western countries, still, you are going to be able to access it, and you're not going to have to worry about paying crazy amounts of money for it unless you're in the US. But in most cases, what the reality of the amazing Western healthcare systems looks like is that you have to sit in line. You're probably not going to get the care that you actually want, because when these systems like the UK NHS or the Finnish healthcare system, all of the other European countries are like, is because they're free, it incentivizes people to use them as much as possible just because they can, rather than because they actually need to. And because the countries no longer have the tax revenues and the money to support these systems, it just led to a lot of overcrowding. It's really not a good system. And if you're a wealthy, successful person, you're not going to be using the public healthcare anyway. You are going to use private healthcare anyway, because that is where you actually get the care that you need in the time frame that you need it. So again, really what healthcare will give you when you boil it down, if you are a high earning individual, is that you're going to be paying for it, but you're not going to be using it. Then people will say like, oh, but these countries are diverse and inclusive and all this nonsense. And look, I'll be the first person to say, I love different cultures. I love different countries, different languages. I've spent my entire life learning languages, traveling around the world, meeting people from all kinds of backgrounds. I love all of it. But the thing is, there is good kind of diversity and there is bad kind of diversity. What do I mean by this? Well, we can compare places like the EU, a lot of the EU countries, to places like Dubai and Singapore. Both of these places are actually extremely diverse. They accept immigration, lots of people moving there from all kinds of countries. But what is the difference here? And this simply boils down to who are the people that are moving to these two different places. The people who move into the EU are people from poorer countries who go there to take advantage of the system. So these people take, but they don't really contribute to the system. Whereas the kind of immigration that is in Dubai or Singapore or all the Gulf countries is organized and it is intelligent, because the kinds of immigrants that these countries are attracting are high earners, growth-minded people who are incentivized to build and improve the countries and therefore contribute to the system rather than take away from the system. If you go to Dubai as an immigrant, they will welcome you with open arms, but you're not going to get access to the free healthcare by the government unless you are a citizen. You're essentially a customer in the country where you can be there, you can live there and build your own life, but everything that you use, you're going to have to pay for. That is an extremely fair deal for everyone involved. The country benefits and you benefits because you get access to the infrastructure, the low tax, everything like this. So unsurprisingly, it's these kinds of countries that do immigration correctly that are doing extremely well, whereas these kind of countries like UK, EU, Canada that are doing immigration badly that are going down. Again, the net result for you, if you are a taxpayer, is that you're paying for the benefits of all these immigrants without them contributing anything positive to you in return. And then people will say that the Western countries have super high incomes. People outside of the West still have the idea that everyone in the West is rich and you can earn so much money there. And again, sure, in some cases that is true. If you're a banker in New York City, even after the cost, the tax, you're going to be doing better than a banker in Bangkok perhaps. But outside of these super high paying industries, it is not obvious at all that you can have a better life as a taxi driver in Canada than a taxi driver in India. Now, I don't know the details of all these numbers. Perhaps this is not the right example, but I know for a fact there's a lot of people moving to places like Canada for these low paying jobs in hopes of getting rich and making money and providing for their family. But then at the end of the day, they're now moving back because they are realizing that what they're getting paid in these countries, these high income countries, is not even enough to pay for their lives in cities like Toronto, like London, like Paris, because the wages in these countries for most jobs are not keeping up with the rents and not to mention the taxes. And even in a lot of these high paying industries like a banker or a lawyer in London, you would be better off doing the same job in Dubai, in Doha, in Singapore, because you get probably similar gross pay, in some cases even higher gross pay in the case of Dubai, but you don't have to pay any taxes. And even in these industries, I know people who are graduates, like just graduated from university, from really good universities, working for really prestigious big companies in London, who live a completely paycheck to paycheck. Their prestigious job and a good salary is barely enough to pay for a moderate quality of life in the city. So it's not obvious. So sure, on the gross, these countries will pay the most. But what matters is not what you get paid gross, is what you actually keep net after cost and after taxes. And going for these high paying jobs in these super high cost declining Western countries is no longer the best way to build wealth. The best way to build wealth is to find an online income where your income is detached from where you live, which allows you to choose where you live based on where you actually want to live, where you actually get the most while earning the same amount of money. And then of course people will say, but what about freedom of speech and democracy? And the thing about this, if you break it down, what does freedom of speech in the West actually mean? Well, it means, number one, that you have the freedom to say bad things about the government. That's really what it means. And number two is that you have a vote on who gets elected. On the first part, okay, you have the ability to say bad things about the government, but what does that actually do? Does that do anything? Does that actually help you, that you can spend your time making jokes about the prime minister? I don't know. Maybe it does for you. And on number two, yes, you get a vote, but does it really matter? Whoever you vote into power, Does that actually change things? I don't think it does. Whoever's been in power recently in any of these countries, I don't think it really changes much. At the end of the day, the agendas are still the same. The direction is still the same, which in my opinion is down. So if these things are so important to you that you're willing to endure the crime, they're willing to endure the deteriorating healthcare, the agendas that you're being pushed, the declining economies, and paying half of your income to the government every single year, then sure, be my guest, you can stay living there. I'm always focused on my life. That's the kind of person I am. I'm focused on growing my business, my income. So really for me, it doesn't make any practical difference, and chances are for you, it doesn't either. So for me, I would rather be in a place that is doing well, that is going up, that has law and order, that gives me safety, that gives me practical benefits in my life, rather than being in a place where everything is a mess, where everyone's focused on not hurting someone's feelings, and where I can criticize the government if that gives me all these practical problems that the West is nowadays giving me. But that is just me. So where do you think you get more that are in this low cost and high value section of this matrix? Well, what is the best value relative to cost to you actually depends on your income. Why is that? Because some countries will be very low cost of living, but they might still have taxes that you have to pay. Where some countries like the UAE and all of the Gulf countries might still have high cost of living, but they have zero or very low tax. So if you're a very high earning individual, I would look into places like the UAE, specifically Dubai, cities like Abu Dhabi. I would look into Qatar, Doha, Saudi Arabia. If you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, a bit more up and coming, then you have places like Singapore, if you are a very high earning individual, Hong Kong. But then if you're not a super high earner yet, let's say you're making under $100,000, then places like Thailand, places like Bali, like places like Malaysia that I've been exploring over the last few months. Unless you've been to those places, you probably have an idea of them as like these poor countries that are not safe, all this. But you'd be surprised to know that all of these countries are safer than most of the countries in the West. They are more modern in a lot of ways. The technology here in Bangkok, I've been surprised to find out, is in many ways better, or at least at the same level as a London, as a Helsinki, where I lived previously. You don't have to deal with the politics of all these agendas and like things being shoved down your throats. You can just live your life, be free, and mind your own business. And of course, also in terms of dating, if you're a male, the women in all of these countries are orders of magnitude better than most of the women in the West. Some people also like Latin America, Mexico, Colombia. A lot of people talk about that. It's not really for me, but that could be something that you're looking for. Perhaps if you're from North America, that might work really well because it is closer. People also like Eastern Europe. Again, perhaps not for me. I really like Asia. I'm really an Asia/Middle East person. These are the countries that I talk about on this channel. If you want to find out my specific thoughts on different countries, I have a ton of videos on this channel that you can go check out yourself. Obviously, these are just my thoughts. You might disagree, but I just encourage you to consider very carefully whether the ideas that you've been fed your entire life about the West being this amazing place where everything is perfect and it's the only civilized place in the world, whether these ideas are actually correct, because they probably aren't. I mainly live in Dubai, and if you're a high earning, ambitious, successful entrepreneur, then my opinion is that Dubai makes the most sense for most people. This is where I see almost everyone that I know who is in this category moving. I have a ton of videos about Dubai specifically on this channel. Specifically, if you're interested in Dubai, you're interested in moving there, then I made a full guide on the process of what it takes to move to Dubai, which you can watch right here so you can understand exactly what it takes. So if that interests you, I recommend watching this video right now.